My awesome scientist. So today we are going to continue our discussion of ecosystem. Today we started talking about biotic and abiotic factors, or living and non-living factors within an ecosystem, and how they depend on each other and how they interact. Well, today we want to start focusing on a living thing interacting with another living thing, or biotic and biotic, through what we call the food chain. You guys are very familiar with food chains and food webs, so this should be a quick review, but please do make sure you are listening and you know the difference between each one of the vocabulary words that we're going to talk about tonight. So let's go ahead and get started. You need to be on page 128. I gave you this in class. You will cut it out like this, and then you just fold it like this. And then you can cut the little slits if you want to. If you don't want to cut the slits, that's fine. But you are going to glue it into your journal. Please make sure to leave room here. Okay, we're going to be writing here. So make sure you leave room on this side. Glue it on this side of the paper, okay? All right, so let's start off with our producers, okay? So every food chain, well, we know it starts with the sun because the sun is what's going to give the producers the energy. However, at the bottom of our food chain, when we talk about our living things, our organisms, producers are going to be at the bottom of the food chain. Producers are organisms that make their own energy, which they get from their food, through a process called photosynthesis. All plants are producers, and you can remember that by plants and producers. So they both start with a P. You are going to basically record each definition, yes, all of the words, into your little foldable. Okay, so the first thing we have are producers. They make their own food through photosynthesis, and all plants are our producers. And so whenever we talk about producers, we're going to be a plant. Okay. So then the next thing we have in our food chain are consumers. Consumers make up the bulk of our food chain. Consumers are organisms that have to eat in order to get energy. Animals would be our consumers. I know that looks a little bit funny, but animals are consumers. And we've got many different types of consumers, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But basically, if they have to eat something like we do, we have to eat food. We can't make our own food. They would be a consumer. Consume means to take in. So a consumer is something that has to take in food, whether it's a plant or an animal. As long as it's consuming or eating something else, then that would be a consumer. And then the next main part of our food chain are the decomposers. They're kind of the gross part of the food chain. We don't think about them as much as we think about producers and consumers. But decomposers are organisms, so they are a living thing. And they basically break down dead plants and animals for energy. And our decomposers are going to be like bacteria, earthworms, fungi, mushrooms, and mold. Okay, so these are the things they basically break down the plants and animals, and then they put the nutrients back in the soil so that our plants or our producers can have the nutrients it needs to grow. And for decomposers, we're going to play dead because they eat off of dead things. And then for consumers, I forgot we're going to do this because consumers have to hunt for their food. Okay, so the next thing we want to focus on, so these are the main three parts of our food chain. We have producers, we have consumers. Producers are going to give energy to consumers, okay? Then consumers can give energy to decomposers. Producers can also give energy to decomposers. So the producers can give their energy to consumers or decomposers, and then the consumers give their energy to the decomposers or other consumers. And we will be talking way more about that over the next couple days. What we want to focus on now are herbivores, omnivores, and carnivores. And you should be very familiar with these, but these are our three types of consumers. Okay, so herbivores, omnivores, and carnivores are all considered what? Consumers. So they're going to have to eat something else. They're going to have to consume something else for energy. Some of them consume plants, some of them consume animals, some of them consume both, and that is going to tell us the difference between those three. So let's learn about them. The first one is herbivores. And herbivores, again, they're a consumer. They have to eat something else, but they are consumers that only eat plants for energy. So this is the big thing right here. They only eat plants. If you've ever heard of your parents using herbs, herbs are like little spices that come from plants. So that might help you remember that herbivores are consumers that only eat plants. Then we have our omnivores. Omnivores, again, are consumers, and they are consumers that eat both plants and animals, just like this bear here. They might eat, other animals like fish and small birds, but then they'll also eat berries and other plants as well. Most of us would be considered an omnivore because we tend to eat a combination of plants and animals. And then there are carnivores. Carnivores are consumers that eat only other animals. So they do not eat any plants. An example would be like the lion. They are usually at the top of the food chain. They are these big predators. And they eat only animals, which we can also call meat. And most of you know that carne means meat in Spanish, and so if you see, you can kind of see that carne is kind of in carnivore, so that might help some of you remember that carnivores eat meat, which do come from animals. So those are our food chain vocabulary, our producers, our consumers, our decomposers, and then our three types of consumers, our herbivores, our omnivores, and our carnivores. And then tomorrow we are going to actually put some food chains together and look at how these producers and consumers and decomposers interact within their ecosystem and how they depend on each other in order to get food. So you guys have a great night, and I will see you tomorrow.